quality carbs, fat at every meal, growth, satiety, and weight management? If this all sounds foreign to you, I've got something new for you to learn. Today on the show, I have two healthcare professionals, one dietitian and one psychologist, who deal every day with a population of kids who are too heavy and sick because of their extra weight. You'll learn about some of the challenging and typical conditions these kids face and the program that is helping families turn it around slowly but surely. You can find today's show notes over at jillcastle.com/073.
Welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast, a show about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of growing a healthy child. Here's your host, registered dietitian and childhood nutrition expert, Jill Castle.
Hey there, welcome to the Nourished Child Podcast. I'm Jill Castle, your host. I'm a pediatric dietitian and business owner. In addition to this podcast, I wear many hats. I'm an author of several books, a public speaker, and a consultant to organizations and companies. I have a private practice where I work with families. You can find out more about me and all the things I do over at www.jillcastle.com. This show is about childhood nutrition, feeding kids, and dealing with the ups and downs of raising healthy ones, inside and out. Are you new to the show? Be sure to subscribe so you can get a notice every time I release a new one, which is about every 2 weeks. It's almost the new year. I feel like 2019 has hurried up and gotten here. I don't know about you, but I'm getting ready to rest a little bit and nest a little bit and enjoy my kiddos who are home from college and study abroad. I hope you are too. I don't want to spend too much time chatting here as I want to share this wonderful interview with you. Some of you may wonder why I keep tackling the subject of weight in children. So I do want to clarify a little bit of why I do that. I do it because I know kids out there are struggling and I want to help their parents do their best with this challenging condition. I also know that parents are confused, afraid, and they feel guilty. So more information and resources, the right stuff, can ease that. And then last, I know if you're a healthcare provider, you want to do your best too and have the latest information. I don't do it to raise unnecessary concern, stigmatize others, or make a mountain out of a molehill. I know from many, many years of practice that there's a lot of little tweaks that can be done to enhance a child's environment, the parenting they're growing up with, and so much more. Today, I'm truly delighted to bring on two healthcare professionals who work in the Optimal Weight for Life, or OWL program, over at Boston Children's Hospital. They're coming on the show to share their expertise and experiences of working with children in the program, but more importantly, to share their advice and insight in the nutritional and psychological management of heavy children who are struggling with their health. So let me tell you a little bit about each of them. Leslie Mattimore is a registered dietitian with a Master's of Science in Nutrition Communication from Tufts University Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy in Boston, Massachusetts. Leslie works as a clinical nutrition specialist, too, in the Optimal Weight for Life program, also in the Adolescent Bariatric Surgery program and the Fatty Liver Interdisciplinary program at Boston Children's Hospital, which is in Boston, Massachusetts, my old stomping ground. In addition to her work at Boston Children's Hospital, Leslie maintains a private practice in the Boston area. And we also have Dr. Amanda Rauf on the show. She is a licensed clinical psychologist at Boston Children's Hospital and clinical instructor at Harvard Medical School, specializing in child and family therapy. She has several years of clinical experience working with children and families from culturally diverse backgrounds in hospitals, schools, and community-based settings. Among her areas of expertise are behavioral medicine, anxiety, depression, behavioral difficulties, parenting, ADHD, trauma, and autism spectrum disorders. Dr. Rauf specializes in both cognitive behavioral therapy and play therapy. In addition to her work within the Optimal Weight for Life program at Boston Children's Hospital, she maintains a private practice in Newton, Massachusetts. So without further ado, let's meet Leslie and Amanda. Hello, Leslie and Amanda. Welcome to the Nourished Child podcast.
Hello. Thank you so much for having us.
Yes, thank you so much.
I'm so excited to have you both on the program. I feel super privileged to be able to get you both here at the same time. I know it's not easy when you are working to reserve some time for a podcast interview. So I really appreciate you both coordinating this because I know that my guests will love to hear about all the work that you are doing with children at Children's Hospital in the area of weight management. So before we dive into all of these questions, I'm hoping that you will each describe in your own words what you do and a little bit about yourselves. And so, Leslie, we'll let you go first.
Okay. Well, I have worked at Boston Children's for the past 5.5 years. I started, right out of my internship. They graciously brought me on. There was an opening, and I was really fortunate to have been able to come on board so early in my career. I was hired as a dietitian to do general obesity work in the OWL program, which we're going to speak about today, and as well as the OWL on the Road program, which was a grant-funded interdisciplinary program that we ran in 4 health centers in Boston. And it was myself, a psychologist, and a nurse practitioner or a pediatrician. And we would do clinics in the neighborhoods around Boston where there wasn't as much care. It was a little bit of a healthcare desert in a way with obesity work. So I started out doing that, and I then added on a couple different clinics. I work in the adolescent weight management and weight loss surgery program here at Boston Children's, as well as the fatty liver clinic. So it's sort of a Venn diagram of a patient population, which is great, but they each have a little bit of their own specific differences. So it's nice to have a little bit of variety, though, and work with the teams.
Yeah, sure. And I'm looking forward to hearing how those different areas that you work in overlap and how they differ from each other. And as you know,
certainly.
Yeah, as you know, I worked at Children's Hospital many moons ago.
Yes,
and,
that's right. You're a veteran as well.
Yeah. Such an amazing place to work as a dietitian.
It is. Yeah, it is. There's 60 some dietitians here, and I felt, when I was an intern, I felt like I did my internship next door at the Beth Israel, and so we were fortunate to be able to come to Children's for our pediatric rotation, and I felt like nutrition was really respected here, and really we were deferred to for what our recommendations were. So I have always felt a real gratitude for that, and felt that my true calling would be in pediatrics, sort of as a dietitian. So I've been very thankful for that.
Yes, I felt the same way, and the autonomy that they allowed you to.
For sure. Yeah, definitely.
So Amanda, you also work with Leslie as a psychiatrist, correct?
Psychologist.
Okay. And please tell us about you.
Sure. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, and I specialize in children and families. I have a wide variety of experiences. I like to say more high-risk areas. I've worked in an inpatient hospital. I've worked in therapeutic day schools. I've worked in community outpatient settings, mainly with children and families, from anxiety to autism to some behavioral challenges, some mood disorders, psychosis, kind of a whole wide range of disorders. I've been at Children's for the last 2 years. I work in the program with Leslie, and as well as I have a small private practice that I do some weight management, but also some just general anxiety or behavioral challenges.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, great to have you both on the show. Tell me a little bit about the OWL program. It's OWL. What does that stand for?
Sure. So OWL was founded in 1996 by David Ludwig. It stands for Optimal Weight for Life. And we see patients and families ages 2 to 20, with the average age being around 12. Typical visit would be a referral from the pediatrician who has sort of been tracking their weight and has sort of become concerned about it. So we get most of our referrals from pediatricians in and around Boston and Massachusetts, but we also pull from Rhode Island, Maine, Vermont, New Hampshire. We saw a child yesterday actually from New York who came for a consult. But mostly it's children and families who live in the immediate area. We have 3 sites. So Dr. Rauf and I are based in Boston. We have a satellite in Waltham, Massachusetts, and a satellite in Peabody. So they sort of pull the western and northern suburbs. And so typical setup, and Dr. Rauf, feel free to jump in here to add anything as I'm sort of explaining it. But the typical setup is a patient comes for their initial visit. They will meet with so we have a nurse practitioner, we have a pediatrician, and we have a few endocrinologists for the medical team. And they will typically see the child first. And on the same visit, usually they will see myself or one of the other dietitians, as well as Dr. Rauf or one of the other mental health, behavioral health providers. And the appointments are about an hour long for the initial visit. And then we sort of set up an individualized care plan as far as follow-up, the cadence of the follow-up, depending on, the severity of the case, what the goals are, what is feasible for the family. So it really ranges based on individual to individual, the plan of care.
And generally, most families that come in see the medical provider less often and come in to see more regularly nutrition and the mental health provider, because we're kind of the ones helping them move in the right direction. And medical is really just keeping an eye on things medically and seeing if they need to, because a lot of these kids are pre-diabetic, have lots of other medical conditions. So they're just in charge of those, while Leslie and I are kind of helping to drive change.
Sure. And what sort of medical problems are you seeing that are fairly common in these kids?
So we definitely see a lot of polycystic ovarian syndrome, a lot of prediabetes that we're trying to sort of curb to develop more, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or NAFLD.
Insulin resistance.
Sure. Insulin resistance, dyslipidemia, so high triglycerides, low HDL, high HDL, some thyroid disturbances. A lot of the families come here hoping for an underlying endocrinopathy, which can be fixed with adding a hormone or something like that. And 9 times out of 10, it's really not the case. And it comes down to diet and lifestyle modifications. And that can be really hard for some of the families because they have tried many therapies, whether, Weight Watchers or a dietitian in their area, or they have a therapist, and they just haven't been able to really find the magic, prescription for their child. And so a lot of patients come and are very frustrated at the get-go about, well, this is just another weight management program. We've tried all these things. And so we have to find ourselves being a little bit more dynamic and a little bit more on our toes to find something to sort of get them engaged and really hook them and try to be able to work with them sort of long term.
And also working with the families where they are. I think a lot of times families and parents come in feeling really judged, that they caused the problem and they feel really horrible about the situation they're in and they just don't know where to start. And I think, at least for my aspect, is really like, all we need to do is start moving in the right direction. Small steps, let's make concrete goals, really have them leave with something that they know they can do, that they can feel, excited about, that they feel motivated about, because this is difficult. These are hard changes, and families are complex. Some of our families are really challenged around the finances, or there's only one parent, or they live with a grandparent, another parent also. Quite often we see one parent with a long-standing history with weight issues and one parent who doesn't, and the one who doesn't get it is really having a hard time, or they have one child who's, rail thin and another child who is morbidly obese. They don't know how to manage that. And we see quite often quite complex cases. I would say it's rare that we see just make a few of these changes and the family is doing well with their mental health. There's no stress. There's no financial concerns. We see quite complex things, that there's so many factors that are getting in the way.
Yeah, I would agree with that just in my own practice of, working with these types of clients for a long time too. It's always very complicated and it's not straightforward. But I do want to follow up a little bit on the disappointment that so many of these families feel when they don't have a medical backbone to what's going on. Amanda, can you address that a little bit? How do you handle that with families?
I think, like most families, when there's a problem, they want to know specifically what it is. And then here's a specific thing you need to do, and it solves it quick. So I think just generally, if your child has anxiety, you want to know, well, what should I do to solve this anxiety? It's not like a broken leg that you put a cast on and it's fixed. I just want parents to know that, this is difficult and, we can make changes and we really can kind of turn this around, but we need to make small changes in the right direction. Even if you're super eager, they've come out of Leslie's appointment and they're moving to mine. They're like, we're going to throw all of the junk food out of the house and we're going to have every meal is balanced. And I was like, well, I don't think that's a good idea because you can't keep that up. Like, let's make something a little bit more concrete. And, and a lot of these families have come in with, Leslie and I saw a family earlier this morning that the mom could look at the daughter and say, like, I know the situation you've been in. Was in that situation. A lot of guilt about putting their child through that. So it's more about, forgiveness and helping them, it's okay. And this is where we're just starting here and we really can move in the right direction. It's not too late, and really try to help parents don't feel judged, like they're accepted here. Because I think if they feel accepted and we're going to start with just small steps, that's actually doable. And then they'll want to come back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What are some of the small steps that you find that you commonly begin with some of your families?
That's a good question. I mean, I think our nutrition prescription is a low glycemic load diet. So that, with that in mind, we're very much not a low carb clinic, but we're a quality carb clinic. And I spend a lot of time really educating families on the roles of carbohydrates and how they make, a body feel and energy levels and things like that. So we usually tend to start with sugar or sweetened beverages. A lot of our families are really relying on juices and energy drinks, not so much soda, because they attribute soda as not good, but they don't necessarily think of that same way as they do juice or energy drinks or sports drinks or a lot of these other drinks that are on the market that are much snazzier than water. And so we tend to really start there. And I think often I say, if you leave here with nothing else, just starting with the drinks is really the big, small change that I can try to hook them with. And then if they come back, having done that, we can sort of chain other changes on there. And, the families all lose weight if they can, the whole family, we have some whole families come in and they say, we all are, kind of doing better with weight management because we've cut out a lot of these drinks and have been saving money on that. So that tends to be the first line of defense that I start with.
And I think for me, I really want to understand the family and their stress level before starting to make a concrete goal. If this is a highly stressed family with that they're trying to just make the ends meet, they're not going to be able to make a huge change. So maybe it's like one meal a week. You're really going to focus on trying to have it more balanced and so that they can start feeling like successful. Or, let's talk about limiting the variety of snacks that they have within their home. Because so many parents, they're like, well, this one likes this granola bar, this one likes this cracker, this one likes this one. And they have so many options that the parents are not able to watch how much their child is actually consuming because there's just so many varieties. Limit the varieties of options because then all of a sudden you'll be like, what? How did I just buy this box of granola bars yesterday and they're all gone? Like to help them realize how things are going so fast, because we really do preach the food safe home, really eliminating within the house those unhealthy food choices. So it takes some of the pressure off of when they're outside of the home, but it's really hard to do that. So it's kind of like, how can we slowly move in that right direction?
I like that. I call it a health haven. Make your home a health haven. I do the same.
Exactly. Yeah. And we always seem to refer to, food safe home. I'm not sure who in this clinic, I think I know who coined the term, but it really is, it needs to be protective of what your goals are. And a lot of times, families do well and they get stuff out of the house or just don't repurchase it. We say like, don't go home and throw out everything in your cabinets, but just don't replace it. And, because I think food is expensive and these families are, overwhelmed. And so I think just slowly trying to weed the stuff out is helpful. And it really is the key and the bottom line for what we're trying to do is all these changes really are, the foundation is to make sure that the house is going to protect you from those triggers and those situations.
So I want to go back to the age range. You mentioned 2 to 20, I believe.
Yes, correct.
So 2-year-olds, let's just touch on that for a second. Tell me about that. What is that patient coming in with? How are you changing your medical management, your nutrition management, the psychological aspect of it for such young children?
I mean, I think from a nutrition perspective, I actually would hope that more families would bring in younger children, because I think it's just so much easier for us to make an impact quickly. You know, I tend to say to families, like, we don't want you to have to come here forever. It's hopefully, we have training wheels on, and then you're going to be able to just fly and do this and make it become part of your new normal. But with the younger patients, I mean, a lot of it is empowering the parent to be able to set limits and to regain control of their house. We see so many families where the children are really dictating what goes in the cabinets and what's on the grocery list, even at 2 years old. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the parents we see come in with, the patient, but also the patient's younger siblings, and the siblings we can see that are going in the same path and drinking juice in our visits and eating, puffs and things that are just sort of empty, unfilling foods. And so a lot of it, we hope is going to become a domino effect down to those younger children in the family. But it's really about, when you say, Dr. Rauf, just really empowering the parents to kind of regain control a little bit and be able to say no.
Absolutely. And I think the younger kids we see sometimes have developmental delays, or there is some sort of food sensitivity or a texture issue, or just behavioral issues in general. So I think parents are really trying to figure out what battle they can fight. Yeah. So I think it's figuring out, like, just because your child is saying they're hungry doesn't mean they're necessarily hungry. And I think really understanding that, because when you're an infant, like, they should eat when they're hungry, but they're starting to move in that 2 to 3 range. They start changing their eating habit. They start, they go through that waves of pickiness. And it's just because yesterday they ate carrots and today they refuse doesn't mean tomorrow they might not like it. They might like it again. Like, really helping parents gain that food responsibility. I like to say it's a parent's responsibility of what goes on the plate. It's a child's responsibility of what they eat off of it. So you serve them the best food. And if they don't want to eat it, that's okay. Like, don't battle them, but just, they're going to learn. And if this becomes a bigger issue, then there may be other things down the line. But just, help them take control under your control, that they can, assert in some independence, but not that here's some more juice or here's some more crackers. And I think parents just some have a lack of education around nutrition knowledge. Would you say, Leslie? Mm-hmm.
Oh, I personally think many parents in our country have a lack of nutrition education, particularly in those younger years, because they start out without any education and are winging it, trying to figure it out as they go.
And the marketing is horrendous around what, they're like, oh, well, I have the Go-Gurts in the morning, and I've had some, granola bars, and parents are like, well, that's a healthier option versus, chips and soda. But I think, they need some education, but then really more empowerment that, you are the boss, you're in charge, your child is not going to starve, we don't have to be mean about it.
I think that we hear that so much. I'm glad you brought that up, because we hear, well, he's not going to eat anything then. And and as providers, we rationally know that if a child is hungry enough, he will eat what you serve on the plate. But if the child, knows that he or she can wear you down and then you're going to make mac and cheese, then that's what's going to happen. So yeah, it's a lot of trust us, they will eat eventually.
And I do a lot of education around limit setting and, building in positive rewards that are not food-based, for trying new foods to help expand the variety of things, and also being firm around setting limits to screen time, to, their activity level that I think parents feel like that's out of their control, to really help empower them and take that battle away. Because the battle during mealtime is just, it doesn't need to be there.
This podcast is a proud member of Parents on Demand, a network of high-quality shows for families just like yours. Download our free network app on Apple and Android and listen to your favorite episodes on the go. So, you've made it through the first year with your kiddo, and life is crazy. You need Parent Savers, an audio podcast providing new moms and dads with the practical information to help preserve their sanity. With the help of our experts, parents of toddlers get the superhero strength they need to tackle the world and the next dirty diaper. Parent Savers is part of the Parents on Demand network. Look for our free network app in Apple and Android to discover more great parenting shows and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.
So it really is. It's, for my listeners out there who are hearing this, one of the things I want you to recognize is that this is not a diet approach. This is a very global way of helping families adopt new lifestyle and eating behaviors that are health promoting. And when you hear that you're teaching parenting skills, you're teaching, I'm sure we're going to get into more of the nutrition aspect and the activity and some of the other aspects that you're teaching families, but it sounds like it's a much more holistic approach than what some people might hear weight management and argue that this is a diet and that it won't work for the long term. And how would you address those who might say, quote unquote, weight management is just fancy words for a diet. This will never work. Eventually, these kids will put more weight on down the road, and you're doing more harm than good.
So it's a question we get a lot, and we've sort of brainstormed and formulated our response to it. But I think the definition of a diet is a way of eating, and so we often start out. I say in my visits we don't do diets. So and they're like, oh, thank God. It's a breath of, oh, good, because they've tried them and it's failed. And it's very cliche to say that diets don't work, but they really a sort of limited diet for a child that's not realistic for a family, for that matter, is not what we are about. And I think, so Dr. Ludwig is coming, he's an endocrinologist. So he has sort of formulated the dietary messaging of the clinic from an endocrine perspective and a sugar insulin control way. And so it's very much makes a lot of sense for families when it's laid out into why carbs do this and sugar is this, and they do tend to get it. So I think it becomes less of a diet in the sense that we use it in the vernacular as a restrictive thing, and more of this is going to be the way that we shop and the way that we put meals together and the way that we think about fueling our body so that we don't get these crashes and mood disturbances and low energy levels that we are hearing that is described during our visits. So a lot of times, families really do buy into, okay, this was going to make us feel better and alleviate some of the really serious health issues. That obstructive sleep apnea is another one that we didn't mention earlier with the health issues, but these kids are very sick. And something has to be done. We can't just wait until they're adults and have some self-directive to make their own decisions. I mean, there needs to be intervention earlier. So that's sort of our response, is that these kids are not just a little bit overweight and that we're trying to sort of, get them into skinny jeans. I mean, that's really not what we're trying to do here. It's very much trying to not make their health conditions worse.
I think we talk a lot about health. It's health. If you're eating well, you're active, you're getting good sleep, and your emotional health is in a good place, our body's going to respond the way that it's supposed to for us. And I think yes, people get weighed and measured here, but it's not focusing on numbers and weight loss. It doesn't work. Research has shown that. But if you focus on changing your behaviors and the healthy things, that's what is making longstanding healthy changes. And that's ones that can last. So I think that's what we're really talking about. What can you do? How can we make these small changes to help families move in the right direction? All of those, quote it diets or weight management things where you cut everything out and then reintroduce it doesn't work. It's not attainable. It's not something long lasting. It's really about these small little changes that you can do every day that become a part of your everyday routine. And then you add another little change that eventually after a couple of weeks becomes a part of your everyday routine. And then that can be more sustained and long lasting and affect your health in the long term. It's not something that's a quick fix, because quick fix never last.
Totally agree. And I think the other element that always comes to my mind is that these are children, and they are a unique opportunity to help them get back on, get on the right, healthier path. And sometimes, they're not laden with all of this baggage from, years of being bullied or years of cycle dieting and the damage that can do, and body image stuff. I mean, they're children, and I'm not saying that they're not going to experience those things as children who carry extra weight, but, waiting for 20 years or 25 years, you've got a great opportunity, I think, with young children to empower parents without even really necessarily having to bring the child into the conversation all the time, particularly when they're younger, where the parents can really help straighten that path a little bit.
Right. Definitely. For sure.
Now, I want to dig in a little bit into the nutrition tenets and the goals that the OWL program focuses on, and then we're going to get into a little bit more of some of the psychological aspects, Amanda. But I know that there are a lot of parents out there who are probably thinking, this is probably just a calorie reduction diet, but that's not it. It's really, you mentioned quality carbs. I know Dr. Ludwig advocates for higher fat content in the diet. So I want to kind of go through that with you, Leslie, so that people can understand sort of what those nutrition tenets are.
Yeah, definitely. So our main focus would be on the first visit would be to really talk through carbohydrates and have people understand what a carbohydrate is, and then it digests into sugar. A lot of people are not aware that fruits and vegetables are technically carbohydrates. So that's usually like the first, oh my gosh, moment that we have. And, I have them name other carbohydrates, which are usually bread and pasta and cake and candy and sort of the obvious ones when we say carbs, what we think of, sort of the starchy, flour-based ones. So we kind of spend a lot of time of talking through different types of carbohydrates and how they digest differently in our body, and some digest slowly. So those are low glycemic, and we talk about most fruits, most vegetables, and all the different kinds of beans. And I tend to spend a lot of time, we have materials that kind of go through all the different types of foods in each category, and we'll have them focus on the ones that they will eat. And I often say, I do not want to hear about the ones you don't like, because we're focusing on the positive and what you want to eat. And we never talk about calories whatsoever. I never bring it up once. Some families bring it up, but most don't. So it's not something in our verbiage here. We do not talk about it because, it doesn't really, a calorie of an apple is different than a calorie of an Oreo. And we go through explaining, an apple is low glycemic. And then, if you go into the next category, sort of moderate glycemic foods or carbohydrates will have things like whole grains and some starchy vegetables like peas and butternut squash and tropical fruits. And a lot of times the kids will say, oh, I love bananas. I only eat mangoes or bananas. And so we can kind of see, okay, so we're focusing on, slightly higher carbohydrate, higher sugar, quicker sugar digesting fruits than, say, the ones in the other column. And so they can sort of see, okay, I may be eating way too many of these types of carbohydrates and I'm feeling hungrier. Maybe I need to focus on sort of lower glycemic ones that have more fiber and water and will fill me up a little bit more. So walking through that and then getting to the high glycemic carbohydrates, which are the ones that we think of as carbs, potatoes, corn, popcorn, pretzels, a lot of the white rices, couscous, sodas, juices, things like that some of our families are eating, 10 plus servings of a day. So we spend majority of our education talking about that. And then we move on to education about protein and fats and how we're very liberal on proteins and fats. And we want to see them every time you eat a meal to having a protein and a fat, because that will really make you feel full and satisfied. And most of our patients never feel full and satisfied and thus just keep eating. So it's the cycle that we're really trying to break and promote satiety. That's kind of what we keep going back to. Does that sort of help?
Yeah, totally. I'm going to play
Okay.
devil's advocate here, though, because I can totally think about what my clients would say. And I hear this from them. They say, wait, popcorn? I thought popcorn was good for my child. It's got so much fiber in it.
Definitely. And it's one point on Weight Watchers is what we hear a lot.
Yeah.
And, it's true. I mean, I think ultimately, look, like the low glycemic eating plan will work. We believe it's the best option given what we know about insulin resistance and the glycemic response. Is it for everyone? Maybe not. And maybe it's not a realistic approach. And sometimes we still have families that are very much like, I want to count calories. I want to track my meals. I need something more concrete. And we work with them and we sort of lean in a little bit and can modify the diet a little bit if they are just very much still shy of fat and adding more protein and things like that. So, for sure, I think, but back to popcorn. Popcorn is very high glycemic. It's extremely, it turns to sugar very, very quickly in the body. And so, if you are sensitive, if your body is sensitive to sugar, like I would argue most are, it's going to, create this real insulin response, and the body doesn't kind of know what to do with all of that sugar and can tend to store it as excess weight or fat around the liver, or, give you a real burst of energy and then you crash. So, but certainly we do hear popcorn and pretzels come up quite a bit, and, orange crackers, which I will not, say the name of, but we get a lot of, but what about, X, they're so low calorie, and we sort of have to kind of go through that for sure.
Well, and I think popcorn and pretzels, people also think, well, they're no fat, they're non-fat.
Exactly.
And so here's the other side. Parents are thinking, wait a second, I thought fat was so bad. It's got so many calories to it. So debunk that one for us a little bit.
So definitely, we think of, I try to explain fat as like the bow on a present. The meal is the present. You have all your food groups, fruits and vegetables, ideally, and protein and, whole grains. But the fat really comes in and ties the package up and makes it pretty, kind of unites everything and really seals it up, because that's really the thing that tells your brain you've had something to eat. You can be done. It kind of creates that satiety that we're all looking for and will shut off hunger in a way that no other food group seems to. So, in our portions of fats on all of our literature is very, very clear, a quarter cup of nuts, 1 to 2 tablespoons of nut butters, a teaspoon of butter. It's not like we're going crazy with portions, but it's definitely a little goes a long way. And we really try to encourage families to start with just adding one fat in at a meal at say lunch or breakfast or dinner, and see sort of how that goes.
So for my dietitians out there that are listening, and I know there are a lot of them, they're going to want to know are you doing the traditional 30% fat calories? Or are you going for a higher level? In my own practice, I tend to go for a little bit of a higher level of fat contribution in the diet. More liberal, as you mentioned, but I'm curious for them. The traditional diet is half of the calories from carbs, 30% fat, about 20% protein.
Yeah, I would say, I think our carbohydrate, it's not extreme. I mean, our fat percentage is probably 30 to 40%, and then another, maybe 30%, and then maybe around 35 to 40% carb, and then the rest protein. So
you're shifting the distribution a little bit.
Yeah, we're sort of taking away from the carb a little bit and putting it into the fat. And a lot of our families really struggle with protein as well. I mean, I think they understand protein a little bit more, but they're still not getting enough. And a lot of times there is a lack of education around what food has protein. So, sometimes people think, oh, bananas have protein. And, nope, we have to really spend a little bit more time on protein and really making sure that they understand food groups. And we talk in food as food groups are protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So we simplify it into 3 groups, and a food has to fit into one. So if it's mostly carbohydrate, there. If it's mostly protein. If it's mostly fat. And I think that's a little bit different than the sort of common practice of even dividing foods out even a little bit more into different categories. But macronutrients, we really try to talk in terms of that.
Okay. That's very helpful. I think parents will really understand that. Let's shift the conversation a little bit and talk about, it's really popular now in terms of eating, intuitive eating, and a health at every size approach. Is that incorporated at all into the program? And if it is, you might not even be using the same language. You might be doing it in different ways. How is that done?
Well, we don't necessarily use that specific language, but I think we do more about trying to be more mindful on our eating habits, trying to, I talk to a lot of kids and families more about, we use food to fuel our body and we have treats, for special occasions. So it's really helping them understand a little bit of a difference of that, and that it's really about health. This is really what we're talking about, and not, we're doing this because we're fat. We can't eat certain things because we're fat. I think a lot of, kids are like, it's not fair. My best friend has, potato chips for lunch. And some of the lunches that we hear that kids have at school is atrocious, that they can't have that because they're fat. And I was like, well, it's not because of the weight, it's because it's unhealthy. And even if your best friend is, 10 pounds soaking wet, we want to eat healthy. Health is the major component. And health makes us, when we fuel our body right, we feel better, our emotion, we are able to do more. It's really about, eating for the purpose of fueling our body and trying to separate the emotions from the eating, because that is so intertwined in our society, as well as with a lot of these sick kids that come through our door.
And the premise is that they're not healthy at the current size that they're at.
Correct.
Well, that comes across from their pediatrician, that their current BMI is at an unhealthy, is at risk or is unhealthy because of the current other medical conditions they have. A lot of these families come in and that the type 2 diabetes is quite rampant in their family, or sometimes we have 10-year-olds that are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. This is like a real serious thing, that this is health. This is, we're not doing like the scared straight approach, but it's like, this is concerning, and we need to make some changes, and we can do it slowly, and we'll be healthier and we'll feel better. And it's just going to be better for us long term.
Right.
So and I think like the nutrition is really the common currency for all of these, most of the health conditions that we see in these children are alleviated by different nutrition choices and balancing more of the food groups together. So, it is inevitable, definitely.
Do you see success with the program in individual children? I mean, I don't know if you have any research pulled together or, outcome data, but even if you don't, are you feeling like you on a day-to-day basis see success with the program and see families actually and children actually turning around their medical conditions and getting healthier?
I think we Leslie, please correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like sometimes it's a mixed bag. I think sometimes we have a couple periods of time where it really feels like, are we doing any good? And I think it does work when people follow this plan. If they're on board and they're motivated and they want to make changes, and we develop a good plan and they come regularly, it does work. It is successful. You can turn things around. But I think the problem already lies is that sometimes there's things that get in the way that are preventing our success, whether it's motivation, whether it's stress on a family, whether or not they can't come, as often, they make plans to come and they cancel our appointments. And then we see them 6 months later and the child has, BMI points have went up like 3 points and they haven't made any of the changes because they've done it for a week or two. And then that, effort fatigue, they're not able to keep it up.
I was going to say that as well. Yeah. We see a lot of effort fatigue, which was coined by one of the physicians that we work with. And it's so true. I think what I can speak that I've realized as a provider is that this is much harder than it looks. And I think families are trying to do the best they can, and every little thing helps. I think our our metrics, our data is that we as a program and sort of looking over across the board are able to reduce the body mass index by 0.1, which does not sound like it's moving anything, but in reality, it's not we are sort of stabilizing weight gain and thus hopefully thwarting worse obesity related conditions.
Letting growth kind of take over and hopefully help the situation.
Exactly. Yeah. We often talk about, if we can stabilize the weight and the height continues to grow up, that will we really are not focusing on weight loss by any means. It's more so, can we grow into this current weight and catch up to it?
And I try to, like, for those families that are, just really trying to, get up every morning and get through the day. It's really any little small thing that you can do in the right direction is better than nothing at all. And sometimes it may feel like you're doing, what would this even do? Well, if you had, a kid had 20 of the, high glycemic food choices and he had 18 that day, that's better than 20. It's all of those little things. They do add up long term, and it may feel like you're not successful and that you can't do it, but you may have a couple of bad months, but it's like, why was that? What happened that kind of caused us to kind of fall off? Like, how can we kind of get back on track sooner, quicker, and stay on track for longer periods of time?
Mm-hmm. It's almost like I tell my clients, it's like putting $1 in the jar every day.
Right.
$1 doesn't seem like that much. After 2 days, you have $2. At the end of the week, you have $7. Big whoop. But you do it for 365 days, you've got $365. And then you do it for more and more time. It compounds upon itself. And then all of a sudden, you're in a completely different place a year down the road. It's like that slight edge. It's, one little effort every single day really does add up over time and can change your life.
Yeah, that's very good. I may plagiarize that.
Well, no, it's from the Slight Edge book, which I believe in. I believe that
that's great.
It's a personal improvement book by Jeff Olson, and I believe that some of these personal improvement, self-improvement books, you can take concepts from them and really apply it to your clients, because motivation is a big issue. They really need accountability, but they also need motivation, and they do get tired.
And I think sometimes parents think that we can create motivation, like we grow it here, and we don't. And I think that I think we often say I can't motivate you and you can't motivate me, but I think you can kind of make changes, see yourself be successful. And that is sort of that motivation that can keep you going. So that's what we hope will happen.
Amanda, how do you address body satisfaction, self-esteem, risks for eating disorders? How do you handle that in your aspect or your role in this program?
Sure. I do a lot of screening in the very beginning for any sort of disordered eating or eating disorder, because our program is not an eating disorder program. And I think if someone struggles with binge eating in particular, we want to make sure that that's addressed appropriately. We don't want to do any harm, that there is very specific programs. Actually, in children's, in our adolescent medicine program, they have a very specific program that deals with binge eating. So I think it's first checking it out, making sure that there's not a specified eating disorder. And then in terms of I would say mostly the girls come through, because I think image is a challenging thing for middle school and teenage girls, is really about, that they're not happy with what they weigh. They want to fit in certain outfits. And they're like, well, how can I lose weight? I had a girl this morning that told me that, how can I burn fat fast? And I was like, well, we need to just eat healthy food. And I think it's really about having them. This is not about, we want their body to change. It's about health and really helping focus on what they're doing, like the behaviors around health that make them feel good. And if there is underlying anxiety or depression or some other like mood disorder, we want to make sure that they're getting the mental health support that's needed. A lot of the kids that come through our program have a lot of anxieties, and they need to be getting addressed just as as important as, their medical appointments around their weight. I think sometimes the pediatricians see their BMI is this, you have a weight problem. And it could be, this kid is getting bullied. This child is extremely anxious. They're up all night. They are struggling with depression. Those things need to be addressed. And that could be a huge factor in this emotional eating or the stress eating that's causing the weight gain. So it's really helping to understand some of these underlying, whether it's causes or things that are driving this weight gain. I think the better understanding of a family we have, the more effective we can be, because it's not just, you have one kid who weighs a certain amount and another kid who weighs a certain amount. There could be totally different causes or driving forces, and we need to figure out what it is and how can we move that in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. It's not easy. It's increasingly difficult, I think, for children in those middle school years and teenage years to deal with media, deal with societal pressures. It's really tough. And I imagine, and I know in my own practice, this almost always comes up, there is always that element of, and as a practitioner, I'm always very concerned about, making sure that I'm supporting that aspect or referring them out to a helping professional to address those aspects, because they seem to almost always be there in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, we are a multidisciplinary team and we all feed off of each other. And it's quite often that, during their medical visit, they'll say one thing. During their nutrition visit, they'll say another thing. During their behavioral health visit, they'll say something else. And if we don't have an eye on every aspect, because I'm going to see it through a biased lens, through my mental health lens. Leslie's going to see this family through, her dietitian lens. And if we don't understand all the pieces, we really could be doing a disservice to a family. And, we each can't solve the problem, but together, when we're working together and addressing all the different areas, we really can move a family in the right direction. And sometimes it may take a couple of visits for us to be like, oh my gosh, I think this child is doing, is this boredom eating that they're doing? Or are they like binging? What's happening here? Because the child is saying no, but it doesn't make any sense. They just gained 20 pounds since their last visit 3 months ago. This doesn't make any sense, like what they're reporting. So what is going on and how can we support them? And how can we give them the right supports and resources that are local and easily, attainable, that can move them in the right direction?
Ladies, this has been so helpful. And I know that so many listeners are going to really get a lot out of this particular episode. If you had to step back and sort of pull yourself out of your day job, but keep your professional hat on, what would be your advice to parents who may have a child who is heavier? Leslie, I'll let you go first.
I think that acknowledging that it is unfair, I think goes a long way. And especially I think with those very impressionable middle school age, pre-adolescents, where things just seem increasingly unfair, and to supersede, having to deal with this and having to come to visits and having to deal with, not being able to eat the same way as their quote unquote skinny friends is very unfair. And I think acknowledging that it goes a really long way and it's very powerful. And modeling healthy behaviors is probably the primary recommendation that I would tell any parent, that if you are truly in this with them, they do not feel so isolated, and getting the entire family on board is really the only way to succeed long term.
Amanda?
So I would say that the most important thing is that we can do small little steps in the right direction, and it can move us in the right direction. This didn't happen overnight. We can't change it overnight. And I think the pressure that parents have about, doing the best for their child, is across the board, from school, you need to have all honors classes, or you need to get the best grades to get in the best colleges, is really focusing on today. How can we make a little change, make a little substitute that can move us in the right direction? And tomorrow, how can we do that too? Today, what is a little change? What can we swap out? It doesn't have to be huge changes, because they can't last and you can't keep them up. Any change for the better is what we need to do. It doesn't have to be that big of a change. even just not having a soda that day or not having a glass of juice can really help move things in the right direction.
Or getting enough sleep or moving your body.
And start with the easiest thing.
Yeah.
Do not start with the hardest. Start with the easiest thing you can do that's small. And then, work your way up there, because life is there's too many things going on. There's too many things that get in the way. But you can make the change if you just find one little small thing, and it'll make you feel good. So the next day, maybe you could do 2 because you're feeling like, yes, I got this. Snowballs start really small, but at the bottom of the hill, if you roll it down, it's huge.
Yes. Thank you so much, you guys. Where can listeners find more about each of you and the OWL program?
Sure. So the OWL program has a website on children's.org here in Boston. I have a private practice. My website is theguidedbite.com, and I'm also on social media with that handle as well.
You can find myself at Children's. I also have a private practice. You can email me at dr.amandarauff@gmail.com. And hopefully in the future, Leslie and I will be trying to do some groups within the Boston area for maybe some families that are not at the morbidly obese range, but more of the, families who are struggling kind of getting things on the right direction. But yeah, you can email me with any questions or concerns.
Wonderful.
Yes, please reach out.
Yeah, and I'll include the links in the show notes for the OWL program and each of your websites. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming on the Nourished Child podcast. And I know your information has been very valuable to my listeners, so I appreciate that.
Thank you for having us, Jill. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for listening today. I'm Jill Castle, and the purpose of this podcast is to help you nourish your child, no matter his weight, shape, or size, inside and out. I sure hope you enjoyed the show today, and I hope you were able to see that lifestyle is a key factor. From food choices to small steps to improve health, not restricting calories or making onerous meal plans or dieting. There is so much we can do to help kids grow up healthy. We just have to use great care and great tact in how we do it. I hope this show sheds some new ideas, particularly around food balance, adjusting nutrients like fat and quality carbohydrates so they work for kids, not against them, and some other ideas to help improve the lives of kids who are struggling with their health. Remember, you can find the show notes for today over at jillcastle.com/073. And if you want to learn a little bit more about play therapy and how it can help children, be sure to look at the show notes or tune into the podcast from episode number 10, where I interviewed Jackie Flynn, and she talked about how play therapy can help your child. Remember, if you're not a member of my Facebook page, The Nourished Child, go ahead and subscribe or join that. You can also subscribe to my Monday morning newsletter and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or on an Android app so you can get a notification every time I release a new show. All the links to today's show notes will again be over on my website, jillcastle.com/073. Again, I thank you for joining me today. I'm so very glad to connect with you. Please be sure to give the child in your life a loving squeeze today. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Nourished Child podcast, where the #1 goal is to help you grow a nourished child inside and out.
This episode of the Nourished Child podcast is brought to you by the Nourished Child Project, a program for parents. Do you feel like you somehow missed out on the basic nutrition education you need to successfully nourish your child? I bet you did. Many parents strive to nourish their child well, but find themselves faced with challenges and questions. In the Nourished Child Project, you will get my blueprint for nourishing healthy kids inside and out. Here's actually what you'll get: a food system that includes a balance of all foods, not a restrictive meal plan or diet. A feeding strategy that is proven to be effective and nurturing to children, as well as ways to build healthy habits for now and into the future. Get the Nourished Child Project today by going to www.jillcastle.com/programs.